Ah yes, hey friends, it's time to tackle one of Eushully's best, and not the translated one everyone already knows about, Kamidori Alchemy Meister. Nah, today we're talking about Soukoku no Arterial, a visual novel RPG card game hybrid thing. I know it sounds crazy complicated, but no worries, by the end of this primer, you should feel completely equipped to dive into the game yourself. This one was actually a visual novel I chose after asking people on my Twitter whether to cover a translated Eushully visual novel or an untranslated one. And untranslated came out on top, which is good since I haven't covered one of these since Rand's Quest. Soukoku no Arterial is the story of Senzaki Shuuya, who attends Tengyou Academy. Upon falling into an alternate world known as the Waibin Sekai, Shuuya and friends are then quickly pulled into a centuries-long conflict between angels and devils. Visual novel primers are, as always, overviews of a visual novel designed to give a solid introduction along with some tips and opinions of the game itself. While I stated earlier that Soukoku no Arterial has no translation, I suppose that's technically not true. There exists an interface patch which translates the interface into English, and there also exists a machine translation, which means A, either someone threw the entire script into Google Translate, or B, someone did that and then had the foresight to edit that gibberish into a somewhat comprehensible script. Either way, I cannot personally recommend the machine translation, as those tend to vary in quality quite dramatically. Also, it's already been taken down, so yeah. I personally use neither of these patches and will be referring to everything in-game by their original Japanese name. Alright, before we get into it proper, disclaimer as usual, while this video contains no adult content, today's visual novel Soukoku no Arterial does have these elements, and I leave it to viewer discretion as to whether they decide to play it or not. I recommend the game regardless of whether this... Actually, while I usually say that, there was one strong fetish that this game kept on throwing at me, to the point where even I found it kind of distracting. And that is Soukoku no Arterial's hard fascination with little sisters. It's all over the extra content of the game, and even kind of unavoidable in the main route. Just wanted to point that out so that you all know what you're jumping into. And well, if you don't like it, the skip button is always an option. I know I use it sometimes during this game. Also, timestamps are, as always, located down below in the description box to easily jump between sections. Soukoku no Arterial is Eushully's 18th title. Eushully is a visual novel bishoujo game company known quite famously for making all their visual novels with usually pretty solid gameplay. Honestly, it's a little tough whether you could say that these would still be considered visual novels, but you know what? I consider all of Alisoft products as one, so yeah, they are in my book. Aside from Alisoft, Eushully is probably the biggest producer of visual novels with gameplay. They have their mainline series, the Ikusa Megami and Genrin no Kishogun or War Goddess series that they started out in 1999, and those are all interconnected into one super grand storyline. Then they have everything else they produce. Unlike the Ikusa Megami series, these products are only loosely connected and may or may not be related to each other and the main series. Soukoku no Arterial falls under the second category. Eushully is really cool in that the gameplay between title to title heavily varies just like the Rand series, making each new game a new novel experience and most importantly, always keeping it fresh. You might have heard of them because of the translation Arreduct did way back in 2012 on Kamidori Alchemy Meister. Personally, I haven't actually played much of it. My experience mostly comes from playing Himegari Dungeon Meister, which is pretty much a Fire Emblem clone. Soukoku no Arterial, like most Eushully games, comes with extra content in the form of append discs. Specifically, 3 append discs and a 2.0 update. Append disc 1 contains an extra scenario with Wilfried from Kamidori, Mao from Himegari, and Haisheta from Ikusa Megami 0, with you getting those characters at the end of the events. Also includes some basking minigame with CGs, and an inbuilt cheat mode for the base game. Appendix 2 adds a few more classes and items. Appendix 3 adds 2 new extra Little Sister-centric scenarios, one involving slimes, the other one involving an angel bear, an angel lolly, and a devil lolly. Finally, 2.0 update adds Arterial Force Blade, a Dragon Quest parody adventure. These are all optional and can't be accessed until you beat the game once. Well, aside from the inbuilt cheat and Arterial Force Blade. For the most part, I think Eushully games are pretty fun, and while the story is not quite as legendary as the Rand's franchise, I think their games are all great one-off experiences. And hey, who knows, maybe the Ikusa Megami series will blow my mind. I'll find out about that when I play it myself. In the meantime, Soukoku no Arterial is pretty darn good, and hope you enjoy hearing about it and becoming interested in it. Soukoku no Arterial follows the main character Senzaki Shuuya, who attends Tengyou Academy with his best friends Kaito and Akari. along with his little sister Mirai, whom he greatly cherishes ever since their parents mysteriously disappeared years ago. Aside from his inexplicable popularity with girls from all 3 different class levels, Shuuya lives a pretty quiet life, hoping to one day become a doctor in honor of MHI, or Millennium Heavy Industries, who saved him and Mirai when they were really young. However, his daily life is thrown for a loop when Shuuya and his friends are abruptly abducted into a separate, much darker world known as the Waibin Sekai. As conflicts escalate, Shuuya and the rest of the school are quickly dragged into a centuries-long conflict between the angels and devils. Who can Shuuya trust, and why has the 2 worlds started to merge in the first place? Since Soukoku no Arterial is a visual novel, RPG, card game hybrid thing, we got a lot to explain. The game is split into 2 major gameplay portions. First, we have the ADV or adventure part of the game, where you move around a map. ADV itself is split into 2 parts, free roam and search mode. Free roam is where you run into all the character-specific events, shop around, or revisit old areas. Character events are indicated by the SD version of the characters on the map, and the main plot by the yellow triangle. The story doesn't progress here until you go to where the yellow marker is. Some quick things to point out here. Top right there's a day counter. That doesn't matter beyond tracking how much time you wasted. Next to that is the BP, which is money, used for buying items or more cards at the shop. And next to that is your current primary objective. You can use that to track what you're supposed to do to continue next in the story. The next part of the ADV portion is search mode. Before I get into that though, let's talk about the actual big gameplay aspect of the game, the card battling. Starting with the basics, your deck is comprised of 1 to 30 cards, along with your single leader card. For the most part, this leader card will always be Shuuya, as you can only get access to other leaders by completing the extra dungeon of the game, which requires you to beat the game at least twice before you can even access it. The only time you don't use your own constructed deck is during X battles, where the game forces a deck for you to use. Before any battle, you are taken to a prep screen where you can organize your deck, look at enemy cards, check if the battle has any special conditions like only using 15 cards, survive 5 turns, all cards heal at the beginning of a turn, and so on. The goal of nearly every fight in Soukoku no Arterial is to reduce the enemy's leader's life point to 0 while keeping yours above 0. Each turn is comprised of 3 phases: movement phase, where you can move the cards already on the field to adjacent positions, action phase, where you can place cards from your hand onto the field, and attack phase, well, where you attack. All cards have 3 important stats: HP, attack, and command power. The first 2 are pretty self-explanatory, but command power is the interesting one. Every unit on the board grants its control power to each position adjacent to it on the field. So with my main character in the top left corner, I can now position a 1-cost unit at the bottom of it and to the right of it. I can then place another 1-cost card to the bottom of the newly placed one, and now notice that with this positioning, I can now place a 2-cost unit in the bottom left corner. Generally speaking, higher cost cards are stronger, tankier, and are more likely to have strong special effects compared to lower cost cards. Speaking of which, cards may also have special effects. For instance, Akari here buffs any Shuuya or Kaita card in front of her by 1+1 attack. Moving on to the attack phase, only cards in the front line may attack, unless your entire front line is wiped out. There is 1 card in the game that is an exception to that rule, but again, it requires you going through the super extra dungeon, so I wouldn't worry about that. Cards can attack enemy cards in the front line that are front or adjacent to it. Front attacks are unblockable, while side attacks can be blocked by units adjacent to it. However, the one exception is that leader cards are unable to block for follower cards. Damage inflicted on units are not restored between turns, and on another note, leader cards are the only card that can override a card on the field by moving onto it, with some cards having special effect for doing such a thing, like this one healing the leader. At any point during battle, you can use disposable items from your stockpile, which can range from healing your units, to buffing them, to healing your leader, and so on. You can also quickly see how many cards each player has left in their deck, how many are dead, and how many are banished from play right over here. Finally, the last thing to tackle is the Ogi gauge, which is a superpower gauge. Your superpower gauge slowly fills up and carries over between battles. When maxed at 100%, you can activate it whenever you want. What your superpower does depends entirely on whom you have selected as your partner before the battle. These superpowers range from healing all units, damaging all units, granting command points on the field, and so on. A quick note, Shuuya after the prologue quickly learns an important ability which allows him to capture any card he destroys during battle, as long as they aren't human, and within a certain rarity. This will probably be your main source of getting cards in the game. After beating a battle, you are taken to the rewards screen where you get BP, record points, cards, and can choose to sell or take the card. Record points are important for raising party rank, which does nice things like make better items appear in the shop. You also get EXP for all player characters currently in your party, and for the cards used in your deck. There are 2 separate EXP gauges, one for each of the player characters of the game, and one for each specific card. Increasing character levels makes their special passive abilities and supers stronger, while increasing card levels raises that specific card's attack and HP stat along with equipment slots. Speaking of which, cards can equip items, both leader and follower cards. Equipment items do a bunch of stuff ranging from buffing stats to granting special abilities. All units can only equip one item regardless of how many slots they have, as some equipment require more slots. All cards can be used in alchemy, which combine them to make better ones, which you can get access to about 1/3 through the game. The last aspect to cover for this battle overview is the partner system. At any point in the game, you can select a character currently in your party that has awakened as a partner. This has the effect of 1. Changing your super to whatever the super that character has, and 2. Granting you their passives as well. For instance, if I select Madoka here, I get a 100 EXP bonus at the end of every battle. For your first playthrough, characters max out at level 9, with subsequent playthroughs allowing you to break past to level A all the way to Z. Moving back to search mode, during search mode, whenever you move, enemies will move at the same time. This also advances the frame counter, with 50 frames meaning a turn has passed. As for what turn passing actually does, absolutely nothing, unless the game specifically says so. While running around, you can also pick up cards, pick up incredibly tiny amounts of BP, and run into enemies. This pink gas is a spot that infinitely spawns enemies. And finally, most important of all, are these purple gas danger monsters. These are basically hard extra bosses present at various points throughout the game, which you can usually revisit during free roam. These bosses tend to be much harder than the actual bosses you face during story mode, but provides a fun challenge, and more importantly of all, gives you their card after you beat them. These extra bosses make a majority of the high cost cards in the game. The last thing to note is that you sometimes run into barriers or special routes that you can't pass. These require you to have a party member with that specific passive movement ability in your current party, like the flight skill, gravity, and so on. And that should about wrap it up for the basic overview. However, if you want some tips on how routes work, how to actually win battles, and more importantly, my opinions on the visual novel itself, stick around. In this section, I'll throw out some tips regarding Soukoku no Arterial, with the main goal of making you feel comfortable with how routes work and combat tips. Minor spoilers inbound. Let's start off with how the route system works in this game. At the end of Chapter 3, you are tasked with defending the school from the demon invaders. If you fail to defend the school, you are forced on the devil route, but assuming you succeed, you are then given the choice of which of the 3 main routes you want to go on. There is a law route where you team up with the angels. Some quick positives of this route is that you can recruit angel characters. It's probably the easiest out of the 3 routes. It has access to most heroine endings. The quality of cards attainable are pretty good, and it's one of the 2 routes necessary to access the final extra dungeon. Some cons are that you can only recruit demon cards since all you fight, and there's not too much Gazelle in this route. Next up is the neutral route, where Shuuya decides to ally with neither of the 2 factions. Some quick positives of this one is that it has the most recruitable characters by far, it has the most unique mechanical situations to play through, you can collect both angel and devil cards, it is also the other route necessary for the final extra dungeon, and finally, it feels like the climactic finale to the game. Some negatives are that it's probably the hardest of the 3, which means playing it first might turn out to be really difficult. It also has the most forced event battles, and the pacing is pretty bad at times. Last off is the devil route, where Shuuya allies with the devils. Some positives are that Shuuya and Gazelle become like best friends forever in this route. You get to witness the birth of Pimp King Shuuya, and I guess there is exponentially more H-scenes in this route than any other. Some negatives are that all those H-scenes are mandatory, capturable cards are all angels, and you only get access to 2 heroine ends. Speaking of which, if the main storyline is based on these 3 routes, how do heroine routes work in this game? Depending on which of the 3 routes you embark on, you'll have a choice of also going through heroine events during free time between each chapter. As you go through each heroine event, you'll be given the choice to continue pursuing the heroine or to close it off, usually something along the lines of, man, do I think of her as a love interest or not? If you continue answering affirmatively, usually about 3 times, you'll lock in the heroine, which also locks you out from accessing anyone else's friendship event for the rest of the game. Heroine routes basically add a little epilogue at the end, giving you access to their ultimate card, and is where the bulk of the H-scenes are for each of the heroines. Long story short, if you like a character, just do all the events ASAP. Some close at the end of a chapter. Time to wrap up this tips section with some battle tips to help you have an easier time. We can start with what will probably be your main bread and butter strategy of the game, past the early part, and that is the triangle formation. The goal of this strategy is to get 2 units in the bottom corners and 1 unit in the middle. This can be achieved by moving your leader card to either corner and double summoning 1 cost units. Then next round moving cards like so. Once you get it set up, this allows you to consistently summon 3 cost units and move them up, or even to make the 3 cost units into supply cards, since they each have 2 command power, so then you can summon the almighty 5 and 6 cost units, which are all ridiculously powerful and broken. The jump in power from 1 to 3 to 5 cost units is big, and is pretty much what you need to aim for during combat. All that said, most 5 and 6 cost cards in the game are strictly regulated to the extra bosses, New Game Plus events, and end of heroine routes. The second combat tip is that there are 2 main strategies in the game. Either you can exhaust your enemy follower cards until they aren't able to summon anymore, and then pummel their leader to death, or you can just go straight for the leader, killing him before you exhaust your hand. First strat involves abusing an early leader item, which grants your leader the ability to draw a card every time you defeat an enemy, so that you get more resources while your opponent runs out. The second strategy involves using 1 frontline card to kill their blocker, and then the other 2 to assault their leader, repeating till he dies. This tends to fail when your leader has a lot less HP than the enemy leader. So I've played 3 Eushully games, Himegari, Kamidori, and Ikusa Megami Zero, and I've only completed Himegari, so what I'm about to say, it's compared to those experiences. Soukoku no Arterial feels like a pretty polished product. The big gameplay draw of the card game is fun and has a pretty good difficulty curve that makes your first playthrough a fun ride as you try to slowly make a stronger and stronger deck. Unless you are going for the neutral route, then I think it's a little harder than it should be. I had enough fun with it that I went through every single route and did nearly everything the game had to offer, which admittedly burned me out by the 5th playthrough. With that said, it still feels like a doujin proc in the sense that a lot of it feels very amateur. Like, these superpowers have a really cool cut-in, but the effect at the end feels kinda sad and pathetic in comparison. Also, no clue why this is a thing when it comes to Eushully games, but why did it only voice the female characters? Like, I get the main character not being voiced, the whole you're supposed to put yourself in the main character's shoes, which is impossible since Senzaki Shuuya already has a personality so strong that there's no way I can relate to this walking cis-con chick magnet. At least voice the important male characters. All the random female mob characters get voices, yet our poor boy Kaito or even the final boss remains unvoiced throughout the entire game. It just feels very awkward when several characters talk, and a third of the time there's just suddenly no voice. Another thing I'm not a fan of, although I do understand why it's like this, is that due to how routes work in the game, heroines are kind of seen as an afterthought. Like, every route has a clear main heroine, so to speak. One that the route specifically makes out to be the most important one, yet the main character can just kind of pick someone else arbitrarily, which clashes with what the route is actually showing. The game doesn't even acknowledge which heroine you pick in the main game at all. It's just kind of this extra thing you do that they tack on a 1 to 2 minute epilogue during the ending. I just wish that the heroines were much better integrated into the story itself. Alright, well, time to quickly rate the 3 main storyline routes of the game, and review my favorite heroine at the end. First off, we got the devil route. When it comes to eroges, I feel like whenever they have an evil route, it always ends with the MC becoming this rape monster, getting his hands on everything and everyone. Like, there's a lot of room for, you know, actually having good conflict, maybe showing why Shuuya resorts to darker, more pragmatic means. But nope, it has a thinly veiled excuse of Shuuya's power suddenly being based on how many people he's boned, or whatever. Which, you know, isn't how it works in other routes. There's also a ton of Force H scenes in this route, like, a lot of them. At least you're gonna see tons of Gazelle in this route, my favorite butt brother, man-at-arms, and overall best dude in the game. Sayane's in this route as well, but I mean, who cares about her? Gazelle's my favorite character in the game, and his appearance in any route makes it that much better. And the harem ending did make me laugh, admittingly. Next up, we got the law route. This one is probably the most predictable, which I guess isn't a bad thing. It's got the whole strict angel dislikes humans, slowly learns to respect them through Shuuya's inexplicable charm. Although, I'll probably repeat this again for the next route, but I think the pacing of that relationship is pretty bad. Seems like Mahisha goes from one end of the spectrum to the other a little too fast, but maybe that's just me. Nothing for me to complain about, but nothing for me to write home about either. Madoka is fantastic in this route though, and it's the only one we can pick her as a heroine. Last up and my favorite is the neutral route. No surprise, feels like the game sets this up to be the big finale. It makes the most sense from a story perspective, has the most appropriate final boss, has humanity making stand against both the angels and the devils, and it has the whole impossible to recruit nearly everyone for the finale sort of thing. Neutral routes even got the only instance where you play as another character for an entire chapter, which is cool thematically, if terrible mechanically. I think the only real problem the route suffers is that it feels like it could have used an extra chapter or two for the final chapter. Pacing there is really terrible and feels incredibly rushed compared to how climactic it should have been. And my favorite heroine of the game is Gazelle. I mean, come on, have you seen how much I've hyped him up throughout this entire primer? If I had to pick a heroine with an actual route though, it's Madoka. She's the kind of character whom you either probably find endearing, or you hate how annoying she can be, because Madoka is loud, peppy, and plays the Onei-san knows best kind of character. I enjoyed it though, and I do respect her drive to keep up with the rest of the cast, especially as one of the only characters to not get any superpowers. Also probably has the most interesting heroine story out of the 6 I played. And that is Soukoku no Arterial, a fantastic visual novel with a really interesting card game gameplay aspect that turned out to be pretty fun. While it ain't perfect, I think the story kind of drops the ball in a couple of places, and I think its little sister fetish gets a little bad sometimes. Overall, it's still a great ride. Definitely has a better story than Kamidori from what I've heard, and if this primer got you interested at all, go play it! Even if you can't read Japanese, and assuming the machine translation is as hot garbage as I imagined it to be, the Eushully wiki has a walkthrough page that actually does a great job summarizing the story of each chapter, enabling you to understand what's going on. I'll link it down below, so slap the interface patch and follow along. If you want me to cover any other Eushully games, have any suggestions, or want to talk about this one or any other visual novel, hit me up down in the comment section below. Outside of that, you know, like button is there as always, and subscribe if you like seeing this sort of content. I try my best to put in time and effort into these primers, and I hope it shows. Status update as always. I said this on Twitter, but I have suffered severe food poisoning lately. I'm still suffering quite a bit, but at least I'm not dying anymore. Speaking of which, I'm gonna put up a poll on my Twitter asking what to cover next. Handle is on screen, so go check that out if you want to throw your vote. And with that, I'll see you next time.